All right, so we're going to be looking at the maximum minimum of quadratic functions. In order to find the maximum or the minimum of a quadratic function, we need to figure out what the vertex of that function is. Generally, you'll get a question like this stating something that has a parabolic movement to it. Parabolic meaning someone hitting a baseball and it does that arc. Question could be, what is the highest point does that baseball reach? Another question could be an airplane flying. The airplane takes off and then it gets to a maximum point, then it lands. That's one way they could just ask a question in that form. Anyways, in order to find what the maximum or the minimum is, first of all, to the side, I want to identify how we know if it's a minimum or if it's a maximum. If it's a negative a, that will be a maximum, meaning the shape of the graph would look like that. If it's a positive a, that is a minimum, meaning the shape of the graph will look like that. So straight from the top, we could look at this equation and tell that a is positive, so it's going to be a minimum value because the bottom of the graph will be a minimum of the bottom. Now we need to figure out what the vertex is. In order to figure out the vertex, they supplied us with this nice formula. To find the vertex, we need an x value and we need a y value. To find the x, it's negative b over 2a. From looking at this equation, we could state that a is 1, because that's the coefficient for x squared. B is 14, because that's the coefficient for x. And then C plus B. C is negative 14, because that's the value that's right at C right there. To find x, we go ahead and we put it in our formula. So it's going to be negative 14 divided by 2 times 1. Negative 7. Now, in order to figure out, that's just the x value. So in order to figure out the y value, I need to take my x value and put it back into my equation. So I'm going to do it right here. My equation states that y is equal to x squared plus 14x minus 14. So I take my negative 7 and I put it where x is. So y is equal, I remember whenever I'm doing this, I put it in parentheses. Negative 7 squared plus 14 times 7 minus 14. Recording. So when you put this out, and you could use your calculator, negative 7 squared is 49. Positive 14 times negative 7 is negative 98. And then you have the negative 14. So when you solve that out, you get negative 63. So I could say my vertex is negative 7, negative 63. And that makes sense because it's a minimum. If we're dealing with a minimum, it means that's going to be at the lower part of the graph where the x value and the y values are both negative. That's how you figure out what the maximum or the minimum is when you're solving quadratic functions.